Alright, so it's going to be a pretty short video today. Today we're going to talk about exposure compensation. I'm going to make it as simple and easy as possible to help you understand what it is and how to use it. So exposure compensation has to do with your camera's metering. What is metering, you might ask? And metering is basically the camera's way of determining the exposure based on whatever it's looking at. So how it works is basically your camera might take a look at just one single spot of your image or the overall entire scenery based on what metering mode you're in. The names and icons might be slightly different depending on the manufacturer, so just refer to your user manual. And what the camera does is it averages out all the shadows and lights and the black and whites. As you might remember, the white and the bright colors reflect more light than black. And then the camera determines if the exposure needs to be increased or decreased by comparing what it sees to 18% gray. You don't have to remember that right now, but just in case you're curious. So whatever the camera is looking at, if it is brighter than 18% gray, the camera decreases the exposure. If it is darker than 18% gray, the camera wants to increase the exposure. So it all sounds pretty simple, right? But as photographers, we sometimes need to intentionally either increase or decrease the exposure to get the results that we want. Take a look at this image, for example. There's a lot of light in the background, so the camera thinks the overall image is too bright. So it decreased the exposure, and this is what the camera thinks is the correct exposure. But the problem is, obviously, my subject is now too dark. In this case, I'm willing to overexpose my background to correctly expose my subject. So what I did was I increased the exposure compensation to basically let the camera know that I'm okay with this. This is the exposure that I want. And now Bob Ross is correctly exposed. And on the next image, we have a much darker background and the camera thinks the image needs to be brighter. But because of that, my subject is overexposed because it's a much smaller part of the overall image. So in this case, I decreased my exposure compensation to let the camera know that I want the image to be darker. And this is the result that I got. The background was much darker, but my subject is correctly exposed. So in short, you increase your exposure compensation whenever you want to protect your shadows, and you decrease the exposure compensation when you want to protect your highlights. Obviously, there's no right answer for every situation, but you just have to know what you're looking for. You know, sometimes you might want to kill the highlight to bring out the details from the shadows and make the overall image more high key. Things like this work well in engagement shots and weddings when you want to brighten up the overall tone of the image. And sometimes you want to kill the shadows and protect the highlights to make the image more moody. Your photos don't always need to look like HDR. So I think that's pretty much it for today. So thank you for watching and I hope this is helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below and I will see you next time. Bye bye.